Hey everybody, Ben here. I just wanted to come on really quickly and share with you something I created for you that I'm very excited about. I'm a big fan of using our mind and the tools that we can use within it to begin to create our life, our ideal life, the way that we want to. There's many different things that we can do this. And I know that if you're listening to this, you already believe that you have the power to be, do, and have whatever you want. You already believe intuitively that you can create your life by design. But often I find people, as much as they believe it, they keep kind of repeating programs of the past. They keep, self-sabotaging at times, running into the same issues or even having struggles of the same. So maybe, continuing to struggle with money, maybe continuing to struggle in relationships, continuing to struggle in creating the body and the health and fitness that we want, or whatever it might be, maybe your own personal happiness. So what I've done for you is I've created I think it's about 5 or 6 minutes, but a visualization that you can use, a guided visualization to help you achieve your goals. I know there's things that you want. I know there's things that you can have and you can be and you can do. And so I wanted to give you a tool that you can apply in your life to begin to create that in your life and create it in your mind so it begins to show in your outer reality. So if you go to benspangle.com/gift and you can download that visualization for free, the guided visualization on achieving your goals. All right, let's get you back to the show. Hey, welcome back, man. I am fired up for you to be hearing from Jay Maymi today. I've gotten to know Jay the last little while, and we're going to talk about a lot of things today. One of the things we're going to be talking about is brand new book he just released, which I'll come back to later today. I want to give you a little bit of an idea of who you're getting to hear from today. And for me, it's an honor and a true privilege to get to spend some time together. Jay is a 10-time author. So the book we'll be talking about later is his 10th book that he's released. He owns multiple different businesses. He's a professional natural bodybuilder. He's got his own talk show, the Jay Maymi Show. He's done and has incredible experience in sales and leadership, consulting and instructing with that. And I got to hear about this, Jay, because I'm not familiar with this one, but he's the world's #1 Actiontainer. So I'm excited about that. But Jay, hey, I've been looking forward to this, man. Thanks for being here.
Hey, I have been looking forward to it as well. So, let's, as they say, let's get the show on the road, brother.
Let's get the show. So what is an Actiontainer? Let's start with that.
Well, it's interesting. So for a while, I thought to myself, what makes Jay Maymi so effective when he is in front of a group? And
Okay.
and I have always been in front of a group to some extent since I was 13 years old, right?
Okay.
It's been a while. So
Yeah.
I realized that because I bring a level of entertainment in all of my talks and teaching and training and leadership skills, but in a way that leads people to action. So it's not entertaining for the sake of entertaining, it's
Mm.
entertaining for the sake of leading people to take action steps after we're done.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of put the language together, created my own word here, and the Actiontainer. I help you take action through a level of entertainment.
I love it. I love it. It's funny, as I began my speaking career, I was so focused on just wanting to give value that I learned after a while of making the mistake of it, that without that component of the two things that you've got there of the action taking, right? Because we can overload with information. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think the world's drowning in information right now.
Mm-hmm.
But secondly, too, though, is that it's got to be delivered in a way that actually makes me, I'm engaged, I'm
Right.
wanting to hear. So that's awesome, man. That's really awesome. I want people to get to know you a little bit. You're the product of the adoption system. I learned about you. And so I'd love to hear a bit of kind of your backstory. You started a business young, 13 years old as an entrepreneur. So tell us a bit about you and your history before we jump into a little of the message.
Sure, and I'm glad that you did a little bit of a recon because oftentimes people see the end product, but they don't see the beginning of the process, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
sausage, right? You
Mm-hmm.
taste the sausage in the end, it's tasty, but the beginning part of it is something you certainly don't want to see
Totally. Yeah.
because it's messy and it's ugly, and it's not
Yeah.
appealing, right?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
that's a little bit of my story. I have a twin brother,
Okay.
Joe Maymi. He's still up in New York,
Okay.
and we are an absolute product of adoption. Our natural, my natural mother gave us up probably 3 weeks into birth, and that's a whole other story.
Okay.
And that's because she had already 5 other kids. She was a drug addict, alcoholic. She was 22 years old, struggling. So
Wow.
she gave us up for adoption. And at that same time, my parents, they were looking for one child. My mother, my adopted mother, my mother, really not my adopted mother, but technically the adopted mother.
Yeah.
She was the kind of person that had already had 3 miscarriages. And so she couldn't have any more children. So her and her husband, my father, when they moved here from Puerto Rico back in the 60s, decided, hey, let's adopt. And so they went down to the adoption agency, put the name on the list. And when they got the phone call from the adoption agency, they said, come on down here. They got excited. When they arrived, they found out they got to buy one, get one free. They got a BOGO.
Yeah.
So, what are they going to do? They're struggling financially. I mean, we
Right.
grew up in Spanish Harlem. Spanish
Okay.
Harlem is, you're struggling in the 60s and early 70s. You got the Latin Kings, you got the drug related. It's a bad situation.
Okay.
But so as a result of that, we grew up in very meager means. My
Mm.
father took on 3 jobs. My mother had to stay home,
Mm.
and that made financially very difficult. But that gave me, my brother, sort of a desire, the awakening of the entrepreneurial spirit, because if we wanted to have anything nice,
Mm-hmm.
like the other kids had, the
Mm-hmm.
Walkmans and the Jordache jeans and the Pumas and the
Mm-hmm.
Adidas and all the cool things, right, that
Mm-hmm.
you found during that time,
Mm-hmm.
we had to go out and make money.
Mm.
So we ended up learning how to pick up, not learning, but realizing that that awakening, which a lot of people don't have as an entrepreneur, then even those that are what I call entrepreneur imposters, they think they're entrepreneurs, but they really aren't, right?
Okay.
I
Okay.
think they like the title, but they don't do the action work.
Mm.
They're imposters, right?
Mm.
They're delusional. I call them delusional, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we figured out people are walking by nickels, and those nickels they saw as trash, bottles and cans.
Mm-hmm.
The entrepreneurial vision, the entrepreneurial mindset said, hey, those are nickels. And people are walking by nickels because they see trash.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't see poop, we saw profit. Right?
I love
So
it.
we're picking up these nickels, man, every Saturday and Sundays. We're picking up. What happened as a result of that?
Yeah.
We got the jeans, we got the sneakers, we got the Walkman.
Okay.
We didn't have to ask our parents. But that
Nice.
early stories would develop this entrepreneurial spirit that led to me. By the time I was 16, I was doing simple tax returns for people
No way.
in the
Okay.
neighborhood. Yeah, yeah. In
Cool.
fact, I found recently my old tax certificate. Back in those days, you could fill out a form, send it to the IRS, and pass the
Yeah.
test.
Yeah.
They give you the certificate, you could be a tax preparer. So I did that, and from there, personal training, and then
Right.
got involved in acting and theater, and then in
Okay.
financial services. So, but that early time frame that started out because of adoption is really what created the foundation for who I am today.
It's so amazing how I love hearing from people that, of course, we all grew up with different experiences, but how you're able to assign this great meaning to what's led you to where you are today, right? And we could take the same situation for somebody else, a similar circumstance, and they fall into the victim mentality of, well,
Mm-hmm.
I'm in. Hey, I grew up in Spanish Harlem. What do you expect?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
and instead you were able to turn that into, for whatever reason, you were able to turn that into, how am I going to create the life that I want? So I love stories like that. Okay, so that's kind of how you got your start, and now you're several years into your entrepreneurial journey now. And you have come out with your book, which I do want to talk a lot about. And but I understand, as I was reading it myself, I understand that the title for the book came from, it sounds like something from growing up, slang you would use growing up. Is that right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
When when you grow up in that neighborhood, you do see people that are broke, busted, and disgusted. Yeah. I mean, you see it.
Yeah.
So I kind of took that language
Yeah.
just because we grew up with that language. But the reality is, over the course of my life now, I've seen people that exhibit those traits,
Yeah.
that life experience of being broke, being busted, and disgusted, and it has nothing to do with financial.
Right.
It's got to do with a lot more than just money.
Right.
But that's where that phrase came from. When we were kids, we would just bust on each other and say, "Hey, you look broke and busted. You look disgusted." And So, but it became a great title for this book.
100% it did. And we are going to cover a lot of it, but everybody, it's 10 toxic traits that keep you broke, busted, and disgusted. So you're going to love it. So good. Before we jump into that, though, I know a huge part of your expertise is sales psychology. And just to give you a bit of background too, the majority of people listening today are in some kind of entrepreneurial endeavor. So a lot of people this applies directly to. What I'd like to do is I want to, I talk a lot about mindset. That's kind of my jam, right? I'd like to get to a lot today is bringing your expertise on some really great tactical stuff that we can apply in this. So maybe before we jump into the nuts and bolts, when you talk about sales psychology, maybe give us a brief overview of what you mean by that. I know what I mean by it, but I'd love to hear yours.
Well, because my background, my academic background, once I continued to develop my entrepreneurial, talents, I finally went back to college, and I have a double master's in psychology and consumer behavioral sciences.
Okay.
So by the time I got to that academic place, I had already learned persuasion and selling in the streets. Between all these different things I was doing, making money, right? But then I added on the academic component of psychology. Really, what for me, it means really understanding how the other person's brain processes information in terms of making a decision, so that you could leverage that to position your wording, position your message better, so that you're speaking to the right person at the right time and not missing the mark because you're saying all the wrong things to the wrong person. And what most people don't understand, there's two decision makers that lives in your head. One is the conscious, one is the subconscious. And the subconscious is 95% of the decision maker. That's where psychology comes in. And most people, and because I've hired, recruited, and trained salespeople, they shoot themselves in the foot, unbeknownst to them, because they don't understand who's in front of them. And the cool thing about that is you could become a Jedi. You could become, in fact, my sales course is the sales ninja, because you can become that Jedi, that ninja, if you understand the wiring that we all have. We all have the same wiring inside this little nutshell. The difference is the programming, but the wiring is the same. So I know if I say a certain thing to a person, I know how they're going to react more or less, as long as they're in their right frame of mind. And I could leverage that. I know the trigger words. I know the places that people are motivated from. That's using true psychology to sell better.
So let's give some examples of that. When you talk about, for the most part, people respond fairly similar. So maybe some of even those trigger words as an example. Let's hear of some of them.
Well, the first motivator we have is fear.
Okay.
Where we move when we are in fear. Love doesn't motivate. Love doesn't move people. That's a secondary. But fear, and what does fear comes from? Preservation. People have to understand when we were in our process of developing our cognitive abilities, before we could do internet stuff, we were running around as primitive beings with three functions. Stay alive, right? And that's self-preservation. Eat, right? And mate.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. That's it. That's our whole day was, how do we stay alive? What are we going to eat? And who are we going to mess around with, right? for duplication processes, right?
Sure.
Pleasure.
Sure.
But that was it, right? We didn't think about the internet. We weren't worrying about these other things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's when we have what's called the reptilian brain. Right. The reptilian brain, right?
Yeah.
Well, guess what? Preservation hasn't gone away.
No.
If you have any human being who walks down an alley at 2:00 in the morning, depending where you are, even it doesn't matter where you are, that person at 2:00 in the morning already has their fear factor up.
They're on alert. Yeah.
They're on alert. And if they see a shady character walking on the same side of the street, half a mile away, they're going to cross the street naturally. Why?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Preservation, self-preservation.
Yeah.
Well, in the world of financial services, and even when I was a personal trainer, I understood that. So I used to not use fear as a way to manipulate, because there are those who do, and that works, right? but fear in the sense of helping people recognize the concern.
Mm,
What could go wrong if you don't do dot dot? What could go wrong
mm,
if you don't insure your family and you pass away?
mm,
What could go wrong if you don't save enough money and you're now
mhm,
65? What
mhm,
could go wrong if you don't continue to, if you don't go to the gym
mhm,
to work? What could go wrong?
mm,
And when you ask somebody, what could go wrong?
mm,
Their mind, their subconscious mind is going to drum up imagery, experiences,
mm,
emotions of all the things that could go wrong. And now fear steps right in.
hmm,
And people, to avoid that image of what's scary,
mhm.
are more quicker to take action than if they're not presented the information that particular way. That makes sense?
Oh, it makes a lot of sense for sure. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, as I hear you say that, just thinking about it, of the questions are amazing because they kind of hook the mind, right? It gets us,
Right.
yeah, the
Right.
mind's going to look for an answer, right? It's looking for an
Correct.
answer of it. So,
Correct. Right.
what could go wrong if I don't, get this figured out in whatever it is, whatever kind of business you're in,
Whatever it
right?
is,
Yeah.
whatever it is. And the minute they start to answer that,
Yeah.
what I teach and train people outside of within my organization and outside of my organization,
Hmm.
I tell them, you when you ask that question, you shut up.
Mm,
You don't need to say anything else. Let their mind go to work.
hmm.
Let the imagery that's going to be conjured up go to work.
Hmm.
The images are going to conjure up emotions.
Hmm.
When I used to do ministry, I was in ministry at one time,
Okay.
and I used to do marriage ministry.
Okay.
It was men's ministry, but we're talking about marriage.
Hmm.
And I used to tell the guys as we had conversations, and they were pretty open because it was a very transparent group of guys.
Hmm.
And there was guys that were struggling with, we all struggle with stuff, right?
Hmm.
As men. So
Hmm.
I used to tell them, hey man, so what could go wrong if your wife found out about that?
Mm,
I didn't have to say anything else.
mm,
And they would answer.
mm,
She
mhm,
It's a very good likelihood she would leave me.
mm,
And then I would ask them, well, what would be horrible about that if that happened? And then, man, the minute they started answering that, my kids, fear.
mm,
So all I did in the end was ask them, well, how quick you want to fix that problem?
mm,
What's How quick you want to fix that problem?
mhm.
So anyway, it's powerful.
For sure it
One
is.
question,
Yeah,
one question
yeah.
changes everything. That's psychology.
That's amazing. And are you, we I hear Tony talk about all the time, but that desire to avoid pain and gain pleasure are the two primary things we're looking. So you begin with this where what could go wrong, you know, what would be horrible about that? Or you're getting them to kind of paint that picture. Are you then moving them into a greater vision of the future? Walk me through a bit of that process, if that's part of it, or
Yeah, it is. And
yeah.
Tony's point is, people pain and pleasure, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
People will move quicker to avoid pain than gain pleasure. And here's the
100%.
reason why. Yeah, because
100%.
they can negotiate the amount of pleasure that they want to have.
Right.
If they want to have a lot of pleasure, they'll work hard towards it. But
Right.
if they see the work is too hard, they'll
Yeah.
say, well, I don't need that much pleasure.
Yeah. 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 For
I'll
sure.
take
Yeah.
a little.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But pain,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So yeah, once you help people recognize pain, and by the way, one of the things we're doing in our training classes in our
Hmm.
offices is we're talking about how do you elevate the concern in
Hmm.
someone.
Mm, hmm.
When you elevate concern, and I'll give you some tips in a second on that.
Sure.
When you elevate concern, the decision making process that you want the other person to make becomes that much easier
Mm,
because most people aren't aware of the high degree of concern until you make it so noticeable that they have to do something. And that's where, again, these questions are come from, where it roots this concern, this fear.
right.
But once they get to that point and they verbalize what can go wrong,
Hmm.
then that's when you bring in the not the pleasure. I don't like to use the word pleasure,
Okay.
but the remedy, right?
Sure.
How,
Yeah.
how do you then remove the pain? How
Yeah.
do you remove the pain? Because by
Yeah.
removing the pain, is not
Yeah.
necessarily pleasure so much as I've eliminated the pain.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So here's a great question for that. You
Yeah.
just asked somebody,
Yeah.
once they have brought the pain, the fear, and what can go wrong. Here's a great question. Here's the $1 million question right now. This is going to make the whole show. What are you going to do about that?
Mm.
Hey, here's my greatest concern. Here's the reason why I need to do this. And all the fear and preservation, all these things that they're talking about now comes to the surface. Your question is, so how important is it for you to not experience that? What are you going to do about that? What can we do to move away from that happening? What
Mm.
has to happen so that doesn't happen?
Mm-hmm.
And they will answer what you want them to answer.
Mm.
Now you become the facilitator,
Mm.
not the convincer.
Mm. You know, what I found is that great leaders, great salespeople, great coaches are great question askers, right?
Correct.
Where, like you said, it's not about, in some people may do it this way, but it's not about, manipulating someone but instead allowing them through their own answers to come to the place where they're ready to take some action. They're ready to make a move on that. And
Exactly.
yeah. Yeah. And I totally agree with you, man. I mean, we will pay for people that can solve our problems, right? We will pay for people that can get rid of the pain points that we have in our life.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's seemingly, it seems like you said, I mean, we'll actually pay much more for that and more often than we will for someone that says, well, I could help you make X amount of dollars, or I could help you, get the car, get the home, get the body, get the whatever. It does seem that we're more motivated by that for sure. Yeah.
Let me give you an example. So when I was in personal training, one of the reasons why I did really, really well,
Mm-hmm.
again, that was one of my early entrepreneurial
Mm-hmm.
expressions. I was a personal trainer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I learned early on that to ask somebody, and I focused on men. I don't really do too much women.
Mm-hmm.
I would ask the guys early on before I learned and
Mm-hmm.
implemented what I'm talking about here.
Mm-hmm.
I would ask them, so how much muscle do you want to gain?
Mm.
And I would kind of have fun with that. I'll say, look at my bicep. You want your bicep to like my spine? And oh yeah, sure. But I wouldn't get the response I wanted, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to when I would ask the men,
Mm-hmm.
so how much weight you looking to lose in the next 30 days?
Interesting. Yeah.
And I would get them more with, I want to lose the weight,
Yeah.
right? Than the gain of a muscle, right? Um, so sometimes uh, avoiding something that you rather it's not the pursuit of gain,
Mm-hmm.
is the loss of something, and maybe I think in the end it was an image thing. They wanted to lose weight because
Yep.
self-confidence, and maybe they weren't
Totally.
feeling confidence, right?
Totally.
They didn't care about the bicep, they just wanted to lose 30 pounds,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But questions make a big deal, man.
Yeah, they
Questions.
do. Well, I mean, and that example is a great example that when we're thinking of the pain, we're moving away from the pain is how I feel about how I
Right.
look.
Right. That's exactly right.
I want to
Yeah.
get rid of that. Like, I don't want to
Right.
feel that way anymore.
Yeah.
Right. And we may not know exactly how I do want to feel, but I know I don't want to feel that way. Yeah. Yeah.
In sales, just because I think this will help a lot of you guys.
Mm-hmm.
If you are in business, if you're an entrepreneur,
Mm-hmm.
what's the pain point? The pain point is when you're not making any money
Mm-hmm.
and your bills are piling up, the creditors are
Mm-hmm.
falling, you're running
Mm-hmm.
scared,
Mm-hmm.
and who likes to feel like that, right?
Totally.
Well, if you are concerned, rather if that is your current state, the pain that you're feeling is the pain of regret or the pain of being broke,
Mm-hmm.
then the question is, what are you willing to do not to feel that?
Mm-hmm.
Is it worth making a few more phone calls? Is it worth
Yeah.
talking to a few more people?
Yeah.
Is it worth staying up late? Is it worth getting up earlier?
Right.
Is it worth working a little harder
Right.
to avoid ever feeling that way?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Powerful stuff, man.
Oh, it's really powerful. I remember early in my career, I'm probably 2 or 3 years into my entrepreneurial journey at this point. And what you described was it. I mean, creditors were calling, I got stuff in collections. I'm behind on everything. I got no money coming in, no sales. And I vividly remember getting to my lowest point of intense pain where I had to make a phone call to a family member that I never wanted to make in my life. And it hurt, Jay. It hurt so much that was the moment for me where, you talk about people reaching rock bottom. That was my personal rock bottom. And that is where I made a decision to change. So for me personally, it was where I'd already been doing this, at that point, whatever it was, 2.5, 3 years. I knew what to do, but I wasn't doing it. I wasn't doing enough of it. And it was, for me, it was that immense pain. What I like about what you're talking about is you're helping people and you're teaching people how they can become effective so that people don't need to wait for a rock bottom to change. That's what it was for me, but I didn't need to wait for that. And
there's there's so much wisdom in what you said that if there's nothing else that people get out of this podcast, this little 10-second clip, that you don't have to wait around for things to get that bad.
No,
you don't have to. I went from a place I in my life, and I'm not going to get into that because we don't have time for that. But similar to what you said, years and years and years and years and years ago, when I switched from the prior company I was at to the company I'm with now, it was very difficult for me. And I just gotten married. My wife had just gotten pregnant. I mean, boom, boom, boom. It was a mess. A mess. I learned what it means to go from a sense of urgency to a state of an emergency.
Well said. Yeah.
Right. There's a difference.
Yeah, there is.
You could have a sense of urgency.
Yeah.
But it's not until you're in a state of an emergency.
Yeah.
That you find out, number one, who you are and what you're willing to do.
Right. Yeah.
You got to the state of an emergency.
Oh, for sure. Yep.
Pick up that phone call and call somebody you didn't want to call.
Yeah.
I got to a state of an emergency. And I tell you what, I remember that day just like you do, because that's the day it all turned around. Right?
Yep.
That's what you call a watershed moment.
Right.
That was a watershed moment for me, brother.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But most people don't have to get to that place if they just do what they need to do early on.
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly it. Man, this is so good. I mean, we could probably do several other hours continuing on this subject. I want to get, because I want people to get your book too, but I want to get to the book. I want to start talking about it. And so again, it's the 10 toxic traits that keep you broke, busted, and disgusted. And what I loved when I was reading the book, and thank you for including me in that, what I loved about it was that as I read the title, I want everybody to understand this. I mean, the title could be, I mean, immediately you might be a little offended, right? Where you think, like, hey, but then when you read the book, though, guys, I just want you to understand, when you read the book, the title's going to grab you. It might catch you a little bit, but Jay's, the way he delivers it, though, you'll see it. I mean, every trait all of us have experienced, right? There's not a trait in there that we haven't gone through in some way, shape, or form. But then the way you deliver it, though, is that it's with candor. So you're very direct in what you deliver it, but it's also with compassion. And it is not, guys, it's not a, in your face, make you feel bad kind of book. I mean, it's really designed. What I noticed about it was just really designed to help you recognize and become aware of, how might I be, living this trait in my life right now? And then what can I actually do about it? So I love the way you wrote it. And I just think you did a really good job with it. So it's cool.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate that. I'm glad that you pointed it out, because that is so true.
Yeah.
It's written where I grab somebody by the shirt, grab a person and say, hey, but I love them afterwards. I give them 100%.
100%. Yeah. Well, I mean, so many of them too. I mean, you're weaving in, you're not sitting from the pedestal saying, hey, listen, you got to get your, what together. It's man, this is how this showed up in my life.
Right.
And,
right.
Yeah. So I'm curious for you, out of the 10, and we're not going to go through all 10 today. People can get the book. We'll probably talk about a couple of them. Which one in your life, for you as the author, you as the expert teaching this to other people, out of the 10, which one did you find maybe the hardest to change in your life?
I tell you, I think impulsivity. It's gotten me into trouble.
Okay.
Impulsivity, not thinking things through, not taking time to just absorb all aspects of it.
Yeah.
And just thinking that without doing any real fact finding, I can get away with this decision. That has come back and has cost me. I've had to learn how to hit the pause button. I think a lot of people who live in our world, we're ambitious. We want success. So we're a lot quicker to make impulsive decisions because we want it now. Right. And that could be problematic.
Yeah.
And I think most people, when they trace back their bad decisions, it's
Mhm.
been because they were impulsive,
Mm.
you know?
Mhm.
So I would say that's one that for me
Yeah.
is one of those traits that I've had to get a hold on. And even my wife now sometimes tells me, slow down, brother,
Right.
slow down.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. I remember that chapter because you got a funny story about that.
Right. Right.
And yeah, it's
Right.
a great example of it for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that it's interesting as you say that. I mean, I look at my life and, that there's no doubt that that's cost me a lot too at different
Hmm.
times.
Hmm.
Um, and, and interesting, I just thought of this right now, Jay, but in some ways, that part that has impacted you. I also bet the flip side of that coin, though, is that to some ways, there's been, you're probably quick to make some decisions that have served you really well too, right? And
Absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
I think there's something to be said about, and you learn this as you get older, you learn this as you get life experience,
Mhm,
to learn that there's a difference between that by side, there's the progress. You find the button for progress,
mhm,
but next to it is the button for pause.
mm,
And as you're pursuing progress, you have to not lose sight of the pause button
mm,
because sometimes the way you have more progress is by hitting the pause.
mhm, mhm.
Maturity, life maturity teaches you that. And then how to make measured decisions,
Right,
calculated risk,
right,
measured decisions.
right.
That helps offset and counterbalance impulsivity.
Totally, it does. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally, it does. I'd like you to talk a bit about this trait, and for me, it was one of the most interesting ones. Actually, I can't remember if it's
Hmm.
5 or 6, but it was the identity crisis part. Yeah,
Oh yeah.
and you said something in that chapter that I made note of, and uh, and I wanted to expand on this because you said when you don't know your true identity, you'll never know your true value. And as I read that, I loved it, and I thought, man, this is a powerful chapter,
Hmm.
knowing your true identity. So, can you expand on that idea?
Yeah, it's funny because in the people business, I've always been in the people business.
Right,
Always. I've never been an isolationist.
right.
Everything I've ever done, I've interacted, recruiting, training,
Mhm,
uh, no matter whatever, people.
mhm, mhm,
So these traits come from observing not only my own personal life, but observing others. And one of the things that I've noticed as a common thread of a challenge, common thread of a bad trait is
mhm,
when people don't know who they are. So if you don't know who you are,
mhm,
two things will occur.
mhm.
You will always try to become whatever else somebody wants you who they want you to become. Your
Yeah,
Play-Doh,
yeah,
your Play-Doh.
right.
Play-Doh, the old Play-Doh clay, shape it whatever you want to shape it, however you want to shape it, it becomes whatever you want.
Yeah,
Well, if you don't know who you are, then others are going to mold you in the identity they want you to have in their own eyes. But it
yeah,
may not be you, right?
right, right.
So, and I use that in sort of the entrepreneurial sense as well, because you and I both know there's plenty of people that love to be an entrepreneur. They want to be in their own business,
Mhm,
maybe because they see their friends doing it, their next door neighbor, maybe something they get these glamour eyes over it.
mhm, mhm,
But that's not who you are.
mhm,
You're not that's not your identity. You are a very good processor of work,
mm,
meaning you're an employee. Nothing wrong with that,
mhm,
and there's a difference between identifying yourself as a processor of work
mm,
or as a work creator.
mm,
You can be both, but sometimes your greater strength is one and over the others.
mhm,
I'm not a processor of somebody else's work.
mhm,
I learned that about me. That's my identity. I'm
mhm,
not good at processing somebody else's work. I am
mhm,
better at creating my own.
mhm,
And there's some people that when they join an entrepreneurial business,
mhm,
they're not good at creating activity. They
mhm,
don't have it. That's not who they're supposed to be. That's not their calling. But
mhm,
boy, are they very good at processing somebody else's.
mm,
That's an employee mindset, right?
mhm, mhm,
That's what I mean. If you don't know who you are, you're not going to be able to flow in what I call your anointing,
mhm,
and you'll always have a struggle throughout life because
mhm,
you're not happy. You're trying to
mhm.
figure it out, and boy, your whole life can flash right by you, and you still didn't arrive at the person you were called to be, doing the thing you were assigned to do.
That's thank you. That I have to share with you that for me, that was a large part of the last few years for me was recognizing, and I know this is part of the strategy that you teach even in the book too, but is really taking a look at, okay, well, how do I, how do I really start to get this idea of a true identity? Who am I really? And a big part of it is, recognizing the gifts and strengths, right?
Hmm.
Of where do I naturally excel? What am I naturally inclined to do? Because we can develop those, right? I think that there's a level of giftedness in all of us for various things, and we can develop those. Typically, we can develop those gifted strengths significantly more than in your example of maybe the person where, yours is more of a creator that way versus a processor. And if we don't stop to acknowledge those things, I think that the further we move away from our gifts and strengths, the more unhappy we become.
Hmm.
Because to your point, right? You called it something differently. I apologize, I'm not able to repeat it, but where you're
Okay.
just not stepping into who you're meant to be.
Right.
Did you call it your anointing? Is that what you called it?
Your anointing. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
There's something to be said. And I was just having a conversation with a woman,
Hmm.
um, 74 years old, lovely, lovely lady,
Hmm.
but 74 years old, and she still doesn't know
Mm,
who she is.
mm,
Married 4 times,
mm,
tried all sorts of businesses, unhappy.
mm-hmm,
And she's 74, right?
mm-hmm,
So I was coaching her because she ended up buying my book, and then
mm-hmm,
she said, "Hey, do you do coaching?" And I said, "Okay." So that's how she
mm-hmm,
came to my radar.
mm-hmm,
But it's important to sit down and do something that most people don't do,
mm,
and it's to ask yourself, "Who am I,
mm-hmm,
and who am I not?"
mm,
And crystallize it. Who am I? Who am I not?
mm,
What am I willing, based on who I am,
mm-hmm,
to what's non-negotiable for me?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Right.
And what am I willing to negotiate? And as you start to ask these questions,
Yeah.
you recognize that, okay, you start to peel the onions of your identity and you realize, holy crap, so that's who that guy is.
Right.
And then you gravitate towards the things that support the identity, not detract the identity. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that word you use, non-negotiables, is important, because I think it's also too, if we begin to think, well, who am I not? And I want to hear your perspective on this. How do you help someone if they're the difference between who they're not versus maybe they're just afraid to do those things, to take those steps? You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. And I think, again, that's where most people don't take the time, because deep down inside, they really don't want to know.
Mm,
Because when you know who you are, it's going to force you to make some decisions that may not be the
right.
decisions you want to make. It's going to force you to move away from some people that you have no
Right.
business being with. It's going to
Right.
force you to not do things that you think you can do.
Yeah.
It's going to bring
Right.
reality into the forefront instead of this
Right.
delusional existence that you're having.
Right.
And you know what? For some people, it's like the Matrix, the pill, right? Remember the old
Hmm.
Matrix? They take
Of
the red pill,
course.
the blue pill, right?
Of course.
The guy says, you can take this pill and go back to where you were living,
Yeah.
right? It's a delusion,
Yeah.
and some people take the delusional pill because they don't want reality. The
Yeah.
guy's having the stake in the scene, the Matrix scene. He says, I know this stake is just the wiring of the mind. That this stake doesn't really exist,
Yeah.
but ignorance is bliss. And he chomps on the stake, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's where most people are. They would rather not know because it's going to force them to make decisions that they're uncomfortable with.
Totally.
That's delusional.
Yeah. No, that's really well said. I think that, as you step more into who you really are, it doesn't mean that the path is just perfect, no bumps, right? In a lot of ways, it's scarier in the beginning
Correct.
because you're having to
Correct.
leave behind this fake identity that you built up to this point, or who you think you are anyways, right? It's scary.
It is. It
Yeah.
is. I've told people in my own in business
Hmm.
that I've recruited,
Hmm.
Ben, that I've said to them, hey, you know what? Based on our conversations and based on what I'm learning about you,
Hmm.
you're not meant to be a business owner or an entrepreneur. You're meant to be an extraordinary employee.
Hmm.
Doesn't mean you're a bad person. Doesn't mean anything. It
Hmm.
just means you don't have the calling
Hmm.
for this.
Hmm.
And let me just take a second on that real quick, if I could. I know we're running out of time, but I think
Hmm.
this is important. I think we're hitting a good place here.
Hmm.
When people wander through life with this identity issue,
Hmm.
like I did for a while,
Hmm.
right? But then all of a sudden the curtain got pulled back and I saw my life and I said, holy smokes, that's who I am.
Hmm.
And everything that I realized that I had done in my entire life supported the identity of who I was, which was an inspirer, encourager, instructor,
Hmm.
improving others' lives. That's who I was. That's who I've always been. That's my calling. So how do you know what your calling is?
Hmm.
Your callings are always revealed by your gifts.
Hmm.
Your gifts reveal your calling, and your calling gives you the purpose.
Hmm.
And once you find your purpose, there comes your passion.
Hmm.
Why do people live passionless lives? Because they're not walking in their purpose, because they have
Hmm.
no idea what their calling is, because it hasn't been identified. They've not looked at their gifts. I don't throw a 95-mile-an-hour baseball because that's not
Hmm.
my gift.
Hmm.
I don't sing. I mean, I sing okay, but not like that, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, but guess what? I've never taken a writing course ever.
Hmm.
10, 10 books.
Hmm.
And as you read this one, it's well written, right?
Hmm.
Well written.
Hmm.
10 books, well written. Never took a writing course. That's a gift.
Hmm.
Never took a speaking course,
Hmm.
but I spoke, and you can give me 2 minutes to prepare for a talk, and I'm on it.
Hmm.
That's a gift,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What other people work hard at
Yeah.
that comes natural to you,
Right.
that's your gift.
Right.
That reveals your calling.
Yeah. Yeah.
And most people never take the time to examine, analyze, acknowledge their gifts. So they
Yeah.
become wandering generalities.
Totally. And I think that as you recognize those gifts, I mean, there can be many different facets of how you can explore that, right? Um,
Correct.
but yeah, I love that, man. That could be an entire book right
Right.
there. That's your next book
right.
right there,
Right.
bro.
Right. Right.
um, Listen, I've had a lot of fun doing this. I want people to connect with you. I know there's a few ways. So you've got your talk show. I believe you can correct me if I'm wrong. The Maymi talk show, correct? Did I have that right or wrong?
The jmaymitalkshow.com.
Okay, the jmaymitalkshow.com. So check that out there, everybody. Get a copy of the book. You can get it on Amazon. And in terms of social, in terms of people connecting with you, where's the best place for them to find you if they want to reach out to you?
Sure. LinkedIn.
Okay.
They can go to LinkedIn. They can go to my Instagram, which is DJ Maymi.
Okay. Perfect.
The Facebook page is DJ Maymi.
Perfect.
But LinkedIn, I'm there. Just pull me up and connect.
Cool. I love it. Well, thanks for being here today, brother. It was
Thanks for having me.
fun going through this. I love these conversations, and I'm excited for all the work that you're doing in the world, that you've found your gifts and you found your calling, you're living your purpose, and it shows up in the passion you bring. So thank you for that.
Thank you, brother.
Everybody,
Appreciate being here.
100%, man. Guys, hey, make sure you're sharing the show. Tag Jay, tag myself, and I appreciate you being here as always. We'll see you soon. Bye, everybody.